I lit the match and watched the corner of the old family ledger curl and blacken in the fire pit, the flames licking up secrets I'd buried for years. My brother's name was on every page, every embezzled dollar, every falsified crop report, but it was my signature they'd forged when the feds came knocking, my freedom they'd traded for his golden boy status. And now, as the ashes swirled into the autumn wind of our Iowa farm, I whispered the words I'd rehearsed in the mirror 1,000 times. Time to rewrite the ending. Ethan, your turn to burn. The air in the lawyer's office smelled like stale coffee and regret, the kind that clings to your skin long after you've signed away your soul. It was a Tuesday in late September, the leaves outside turning that bruised shade of amber that screams harvest season in the heartland. But inside, everything felt like winter. My parents sat across from me, their faces carved from the same weathered oak as the conference table, Dad with his calloused hands folded like he was praying for forgiveness he wouldn't give, Mom clutching her purse like it held the last shred of our family's dignity. Ethan lounged beside them, all sharp suit and sharper smile. The prodigal son returned from his consulting gigs in Chicago to claim what was rightfully his. Natalie, Dad started, his voice gravelly from decades of shouting orders over tractor engines. This isn't easy. But the business. It's going to Ethan. Full control. The deeds. The loans. Everything. I blinked, the words landing like a sucker punch from a combine harvester. The Harlan Agri-Business wasn't just a farm, it was our bloodline. 200 acres of corn and soybeans that my great-grandpa had clawed from the prairie dirt during the Dust Bowl. I'd been the one knee-deep in the mud since I was 12, learning the irrigation schedules while Ethan was off at football camp or charming his way through community college. I'd balanced the books when the droughts hit in 18, negotiated with the banks when the tariffs gutted our margins. Hell, I'd even covered for Ethan's screw-ups, the late-night parties that drained the fuel tanks, the creative accounting that nearly tanked us in 22. Why? The words scraped out of me, raw and accusatory. Mom shifted, her eyes darting to the floor like she was checking for escape routes. Because you're not cut out for it, Dad said, not meeting my gaze. Ethan's got the vision. The connections. You've always been too emotional. Remember that deal with the co-op? You walked away because of some tree hugger protest. Emotional. That was code for the night I'd found out about the pesticides. Ethan had pushed for the cheap chems, the ones the EPA was side-eyeing, and when the runoff poisoned the creek, killing off the neighbor's cattle, I'd pulled the plug. Cost us a fortune. Sure. But it kept our name out of the headlines. And in their eyes, that made me the weak link. Ethan leaned forward, his cologne cutting through the room like a scythe. Cease. It's not personal. Dad's right, you're better suited for something else. Teaching, maybe, like you always talked about. Teaching. The dream I'd shelved when Mom's cancer bills piled up, when the farm's debt became a noose around all our necks. I dropped out of Iowa State, traded lesson plans for ledger sheets, all while Ethan jetted off to network in the Windy City. And now this, handing him the keys to the kingdom on a silver platter? I stood up, chair scraping like nails on a chalkboard. Not cut out? I've kept this place afloat while you were playing Wall Street cowboy. Who do you think filed those extensions with the IRS last year? Who sweet-talked the lenders when the hail wiped us out? Mom's voice cracked, small and brittle. Natalie, please. We're doing this for the family. Ethan's got a plan, a big one. Partnerships with those vertical farm startups out west. He'll modernize it. Modernize. That's what they called it when Ethan siphoned off funds for his side hustles. The ones involving sketchy crypto schemes and off-book equipment sales. I'd seen the discrepancies. The missing $50,000 here. The inflated invoices there. But every time I'd confronted him, he'd gaslight me. You're paranoid.
Nat.
Always seeing ghosts in the grain bins. And our parents? They bought it hook,
Line.
and sinker. The golden boy could do no wrong. The lawyer cleared his throat, sliding the waiver across the table. Miss Harlan, if you'll just sign here, acknowledging the transfer. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. In that moment, the room spun. A carousel of betrayals. The time I'd taken the blame for Ethan's underage DUI at 16. Letting him skip juvie so he could focus on his future. The forged loan docs from 5 years back, where I'd volunteered as guarantor while he vanished to Vegas. The whispers from the old-timers at the co-op about how the Harlans were going corporate under Ethan's watch. Selling out to the highest bidder. I signed. Not because I believed their bullshit, but because I knew deep in my gut, like the rumble of thunder over the fields, that this wasn't the end. It was the spark. Driving home that afternoon, the gravel road crunching under my truck's tires, I replayed it all. The farm wasn't just land, it was legacy, the kind etched into every furrow and fence post. Grandpa Harlan had died in that silo collapse, whispering on his deathbed that it was for the kids. Which kids? I'd thought it meant all of us. But blood turns thick and sticky when money's involved, especially in a town where the median income hovers around cornstalk height. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun dipping low like a guilty conscience, resolve had hardened in my chest. Ethan was already there, overseeing the crew swapping out the old harvester for some gleaming import he'd financed on family credit. He waved, all teeth and triumph, but I saw the flicker, the wariness in his eyes, like a coyote spotting a trap. That night, alone in the creaky farmhouse that now felt like a stranger's, I dug out the lockbox from under my bed. Inside, a USB drive, yellowed printouts, and a single photo of us as kids, arms around each other in the pumpkin patch. The drive held the proof, the emails, the bank transfers, the voice memos where Ethan laughed about sacrificing the lamb to keep the wolves at bay.
Me?
The lamb. Always. I poured a whiskey, Maker's Mark, the good stuff Dad reserved for closing deals, and stared at the ceiling beams, scarred from generations of Harlan hands. Revenge wasn't a word I threw around lightly. In farm country, you settle scores with quiet work, not fireworks. But this was a gutting, a betrayal that festered like blight in the roots. Ethan thought he had it all locked down, but he'd forgotten one thing. I knew every inch of this land, every loophole in the bylaws, every skeleton in the soil. The next morning, I drove to Des Moines, the city lights blurring into a haze of possibility. First stop, a private investigator named Carla Ruiz, a no-nonsense Latina with a PI license and a grudge against white-collar crooks. We'd met at a Farm Bureau mixer years back. She owed me for tipping her off about a corrupt grain inspector. Harlan, she said, ushering me into her cluttered office overlooking the Capitol dome. You look like hell warmed over. What's the play? I slid the USB across her desk. My brother's laundering money through the family farm. Started small, fiddling with crop insurance claims, but it's escalated. Offshore accounts. Fake subsidiaries. And my parents just handed him the reins. Carla whistled low, popping the drive into her laptop. Her eyes narrowed as the files unfolded like a house of cards.
Jesus. Net så videnskabelig.
This is felony territory. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. You got enough here to bury him. But not without burying the farm too, I countered, leaning forward. I want leverage, not a circus. Find me the threads he doesn't know I have. And dig into his Chicago connections, those partners he's so proud of. She nodded. Already typing. Timeline, 3 months. Harvest coming. That's when he'll move the big money. I need to be ready. Leaving her office, I felt the first real stir of power since the lawyer's table. It wasn't clean. This path, teetering on the edge of extortion, maybe even entrapment, but neither was handing your daughter a pink slip from her own birthright. As I merged onto I-80, the endless flatlands stretching out like a blank check, I allowed myself a grim smile. Ethan had always been the charmer, the one who talked his way out of corners.
But I
was the fixer, the one who patched the leaks while he drilled new holes. And fixes, I've learned, can come with barbs. Back home, the days blurred into a rhythm of deception.
By day,
I played the dutiful daughter, helping with the books under Ethan's supervision, naturally. Smiling through family dinners where Mom gushed about his brilliant ideas and Dad grunted approvals over pot roast. By night, I pored over county records in the library's microfiche room, tracing the land grants back to the 1800s, hunting for any clause that might claw back control. There was an archaic homestead provision about undue influence in family transfers. Slim, but it could be a wedge. Ethan noticed my quiet. Of course. You holding up, sis? He'd ask, clapping me on the shoulder a beat too hard. Don't worry, I'll find you a spot in the new operation. Maybe office manager.
Idenot.
Biting back the urge to spit. Sounds peachy. But the mask slipped once. 2 weeks in, when I overheard him on the phone in the barn. Yeah. The sister's out, total pushover. Signed without a peep. We're clear for the pivot.
Pivot. To what?
Selling off parcels to developers? Liquidating for his escape fund? The rage boiled low. A slow simmer that kept me up, plotting. Carla's first report landed via encrypted email. Ethan's Chicago crew included a shell company tied to Russian oligarchs, grain futures rigged for insider gains. Dirty as a hog wallow. But the real gem? Proof he'd framed me for that 22 at Dodge. My emotional outburst? It was me refusing to sign off on his cook numbers. So, he'd backdated entries in my name. The feds had sniffed around, but Dad's old golf buddy in the DA's office swept it under. That night, I drove out to the back 40, the moon hanging fat and indifferent over the stubble fields. I screamed into the wind until my throat ached, the sound swallowed by the vastness. Betrayal isn't just a word, it's a theft of self, a carving out of the parts that made you whole. And in that emptiness, I forged something new, a plan, sharp as a scythe blade. October crept in like a thief, the combines roaring to life across the county, chewing through stalks like mechanical locusts. Harvest was the farm's lifeblood, peak season when fortunes flipped on a dime. Yields tallied like votes in a rigged election. For the Harlans, it meant round-the-clock shifts, the air thick with diesel and dust, everyone running on black coffee and spite. Ethan thrived in it, barking orders from his shiny F-150, schmoozing buyers via satellite phone while the rest of us sweated the details.
Me?
I was the ghost in the machine, logging yields in the software he'd upgraded to backdoored.
I bet.
For skimming profits straight to his Cayman accounts. The betrayal festered, a constant hum under my skin, but I channeled it into precision. Every keystroke, every fuel log, I mirrored to my own hidden server, a cheap VPS I'd set up in a Des Moines data center. Carla's updates trickled in. Ethan's pivot was a fire sale, leasing acreage to a Chinese agritech firm for experimental GMOs, the kind that skirted FDA regs. Profits up front, long-term poison in the soil. And the kicker? He'd forged Dad's signature on the prelim contracts, using a scan doc from Mom's old recipe book. Sloppy, for a guy who prided himself on being untouchable. I confronted him subtly, over lukewarm chili in the mess hall trailer. Heard you're going big with those leases. Dad, know the fine print? The liability clauses? He paused, spoon midway to his mouth, that predator glint sharpening. What's it to you?
Nat?
You're off the hook now. Go knit sweaters or whatever homemakers do. Homemaker. The word landed like a slap, evoking Mom's apron silhouette in the kitchen, her hands ruined from lice soap and regret. I'd never been that. Too restless. Too chained to the cycles of plant and reap. But Ethan's jab hit home. In their eyes, I was the spare. The girl who should have married local and popped out heirs to till the dirt. Spare me the misogyny, I shot back, voice low so the crew wouldn't hear. Just wondering if you're biting off more than the family can chew. He laughed, that hollow bark that echoed off the tin walls. Family? This is business.
Cease.
And business waits for no one, especially not bleeding hearts. I let it drop, but the seed was planted. Doubt. The great leveler. That night, I slipped into Dad's office while he snored in front of the TV, the den reeking of pipe tobacco and denial. The safe, combination his wedding date, sentimental fool, yielded a stack of originals, deeds, wills, the works. Buried in the addendums was the homestead clause I'd hoped for. Dusty legalese from 1932 invoking moral turpitude as grounds for reversal. If I could prove Ethan's fraud, it might trigger a probate review. Slim odds. But in Iowa courts, family ties still greased wheels. Emboldened, I reached out to Uncle Ray, the black sheep who'd bailed after Grandpa's death. Now a retired attorney in Omaha nursing a bourbon habit and grudges. We met at a roadside diner off I-29, the kind with checkered floors and waitresses who called you hon. Ray looked like a deflated scarecrow, but his eyes still sparked with Harlan fire. Natalie girl, he rasped, sliding into the booth with a flask peeking from his coat. Heard about the shakeup. Your folks finally see Ethan's true colors. Opposite, I said, pushing a folder across. Gave him everything. But I've got dirt, enough to drag it all into the light. He flipped through, whistling. This is dynamite. But careful.
Kid.
Exposing kin in farm country? It's like pissing in the wind. Blows back on you. We hashed it out over greasy eggs, a civil suit framed as fiduciary breach, not outright theft. I'd need affidavits from the crew. Forensic accounting from Carla. Ray would handle the filings pro bono, his way of sticking it to Dad, who'd cut him out years back over a misunderstanding about inheritance. Driving back, the Platte River gleaming silver under the stars, I felt the noose loosen a fraction. But Ethan was no fool. He smelled the shift. The next week, he cornered me in the grain elevator, the air humming with augers and the faint rot of last year's spill. You're digging, aren't you? His voice was silk over steel, face inches from mine. I can see it in your eyes, the same look you had when we were kids, spying on my treehouse schemes. Schemes. like the time he borrowed Grandpa's .22 to shoot out rival kids' mailboxes, and I confessed to protect his ass from juvie. Or the fire in the hayloft, his cigarette, my punishment. Patterns etched deep. Maybe I'm just tying up loose ends, I replied, holding his gaze. For old time's sake. He grabbed my arm, grip bruising. Listen.
Net så videnskabelig.
Walk away clean. And I'll cut you a check, 6 figures. Enough for that teaching gig in the city. But push this?
I'll bury you.
The crew? They'll say you were unstable, jealous, cracking under pressure. I've got the paper trail. The threat hung heavy.
But so did the opportunity.
Generous, I said, wrenching free. But what makes you think I'd trust your checks any more than your word? He smirked, releasing me. Blood.
Cease.
We're all we've got.
Blood.
The lie that bound us. Thicker than the mud that caked my boots. I retreated to the house, heart pounding, and fired off an email to Carla. Accelerate.
Day deeper.
Her reply came at dawn. Jackpot. Ethan's Chicago front was laundering for a cartel, soybean shipments, masking coke runs up the Mississippi. The feds had a task force sniffing, but no leads. One photo attached, Ethan shaking hands with a tattooed suit in a Loop steakhouse. Time-stamped last month. Leverage. Pure and volatile. But wielding it meant crossing lines, tipping the DEA anonymously, blackmailing Ethan into confession. The morality blurred, like fog over the fields at dawn. Was I avenging the farm, or just settling a sibling score? In the quiet hours, doubts crept in. Mom's cancer had softened Dad, made him cling to Ethan's stability. Was I dismantling that illusion for justice, or spite? Harvest peaked, yields pouring in like a biblical flood. Ethan threw a barbecue to celebrate, racks of ribs smoking on the back patio, neighbors toasting his visionary leases. I played along, nursing a beer while he held court, spinning yarns about disrupting AG like Uber did taxis. Dad beamed, arm around his shoulder. Mom fussed over plates, avoiding my eyes. Midway through, Ethan pulled me aside, voice slurred with triumph and tequila.
See?
This is what winning looks like. You could have been part of it. Part, I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. I built the foundation you stand on. He waved it off. Details.
Now.
About that check. A scream cut the night. One of the migrant workers, face ashen,
Pointing at his phone. El jefe, trouble.
Law migra coming. Immigration. Ethan's efficient hires, undocumented crews he'd exploited for cheap labor. No questions on overtime. Panic rippled, trucks revved, folks scattering like quail. In the chaos, Ethan rounded on me. You? This you're doing? I met his fury with calm. Karma's a bitch. Brother. Pays in full. He lunged, but Dad hauled him back. Confusion etching his face. For the first time, cracks showed, the golden facade fracturing under pressure. As sirens wailed distant, I slipped away to the barn, pulse racing. Phase 1. Rattle the cage. But the real storm was brewing, and I was just getting started. November's chill bit deep, frosting the furrows into brittle white lines that cracked underfoot like fragile promises. The farm lay fallow now, waiting for spring's mercy, but tension hummed in the air, thicker than the wood smoke curling from the chimney. The ICE raid had been a glancing blow, a few detentions, fines slapped on the business. But Ethan spun it as regulatory hiccups, blaming overzealous feds. The neighbors bought it, clucking sympathies over coffee at the co-op. But Dad's eyes held shadows. Questions he wouldn't voice. Mom took to her Bible more. Psalms underlined in frantic pencil. I kept my head down, volunteering for the scut work, fencing repairs, equipment winterizing, while feeding intel to Ray and Carla. The suit was filed quietly, under seal, citing breach of trust, with the homestead clause as hammer. Ethan's lawyers, Slick Des Moines firm on retainer, fired back with motions to dismiss, painting me as a disgruntled ex-employee with axe to grind. Axe. Fitting for a girl raised on the swing of it. But the cartel thread pulled tighter. Carla's contact in the DEA, a grizzled agent named Kowalski, wanted to sit down. We met in a Cedar Rapids strip mall, the kind with payday loans and Takarius wedged between. He was built like a retired linebacker, nursing a styrofoam coffee, eyes scanning the lot like it was a raid site. MS. Harlan, he rumbled. Your tips check out. Brothers up to his neck in the Bravo syndicate, using farm routes for product. We can flip him, maybe, but we need inside access. You game?
Game.
As if this were poker, not poker with lives. Flipping Ethan meant immunity for the farm. Perhaps. But it would torch our family. Dad's heart couldn't take the scandal. Mom's faith shattered like stained glass. And me? I'd be the Judas. Forever the betrayer in their eyes. What's the play? I asked, voice steady despite the churn. Wire him. Get confessions on tape. We stage a sting, fake buyer. Catch the handoff. I nodded. But inside, the scales tipped. Controversial? Hell yes. Entangling feds in family feuds screamed entrapment. The kind that got cases tossed. But Ethan's crimes weren't victimless. The migrants he'd stiffed. The communities downstream from his poison shipments.
No.
This was justice. Gray as Iowa overcast. Back home, I installed the bug, a tiny recorder in my truck's dash, synced to my phone. Ethan was ramping up, paranoia making him sloppy. He started confiding, or maybe manipulating, late-night confessions in the kitchen over shared scotch. They're closing in. Nat, he admitted one frost-rhymed evening, staring into the amber swirl. The Chicago boys, pushy. Want bigger loads, faster turnaround. But the farm's collateral, can't risk it. Pity flickered, unbidden. This was the brother who'd taught me to drive stick on back roads, who'd cried with me at Grandpa's grave. But pity curdled quick. Then stop, I said softly. Hitting record. Walk away. We can fix this together. He laughed. Bitter.
Fix?
Like you fixed the pesticide mess? Cost us half the yield. You self-righteous cow.
Cow.
The slur stung, evoking every farmhand's jeer, every boardroom dismissal. Better half a yield than a clear conscience, I countered. Or blood on our hands. His eyes narrowed, suspicion flaring. What's your angle? This sudden sisterly love. I shrugged. Casual. Redemption. For both of us. He bought it. Or pretended to. Over the next weeks, the tapes filled, Ethan spilling on drop points along the river, payoffs to port inspectors, even a veiled admission to framing me on the audit. Had to protect the asset. You know, you were collateral damage. Collateral. Like the land, the legacy, expendable in his empire building. I forwarded clips to Kowalski, who grunted approval, gold. Sting set for the 15th, abandoned silo off 92. You lure him, luring kin to a trap. The ethics nod, keeping me awake with the wind's howl. Was I hero or villain? The farm's savior? Or its saboteur? Readers of this tale, if it ever spilled beyond my journals, would split hairs. Debate over diner pie. She had it coming. The parents enabled him.
No.
Blood's blood. The 15th dawned gray, sleet spitting like accusations. I texted Ethan. Emergency. Meet at the old silo. Crop report anomaly. He showed. Truck sliding to a halt. Face thunderous. What's this crap?
Net.
I'm in the middle. Feds swarmed from the shadows. Vests black as midnight. Kowalski barking. Hands up. Ethan froze. Then bolted toward the riverbank. Slipping in mud. Shots cracked, warning. Not kill, but he twisted, collapsing with a yelp. I rushed forward, heart in throat, as they cuffed him. You bitch, he gasped, blood trickling from a graze on his calf. My own sister. The words echoed as they hauled him away. Ambulance lights pulsing like a migraine. Dad arrived minutes later, alerted by the chopper whump. Face ashen as he took in the scene, son in zip ties. Daughter flanked by badges. Natalie. What have you done? Saved us. I wanted to scream. But the look in his eyes, disgust, dawning horror, silenced me. Mom wept silently in the truck, clutching her rosary. The aftermath blurred. Arraignments. Headlines in the Des Moines Register. Harlan heir nabbed in drug sting. The farm froze. Creditors circling like vultures. Ray pushed the suit harder now, armed with Ethan's taped mea culpa. But Dad fought it, lawyering up against me. You're tearing us apart, he growled over the phone. For what?
Pride. No reclamación.
But doubt wormed in. Had I escalated too far? The feds praised my courage, Kowalski clapping my back at debrief. But the cost. Ethan's trial loomed. A spectacle that would drag our name through the tabloids. From Omaha to the coasts. Then the twist, a letter from Ethan, smuggled via his public defender. Scrawled. Desperate. Nat, it's bigger than me. Dad knew. The leases? His idea, payback for your interference. Check the safe. Forgive? The farm's yours if you drop charges.
Blood.
Dad knew. The words detonated, shattering the narrative I'd built. All those nods, the approval's complicity, I confronted him that night, storming the house, letter thrust like a blade. Is it true? My voice broke.
Raw.
You greenlit the cartels? For what? Quick cash to fund his delusions. Dad sagged into his chair, decades etching deeper. It was a loan. Natalie. One shipment. To save the farm from your damn principles that nearly bankrupted us. My principles. The pesticides, the protests, obstacles to his legacy. Mom hovered, tears streaming. He did it for Ethan. For us.
Us.
Excluding me, always the outlier. Rage and grief tangled. A noose of my own making. Drop the charges? Let Ethan skate on a plea. The farm intact but poisoned? The courtroom loomed.
Factions forming, feds pushing max sentence.
Ray urging me to testify. Neighbors whispering about the Harlan curse. I stood at the crossroads. Scales tipping wildly, no heroes here. Just survivors clawing from the dirt. December stripped the land bare. Skeletal trees clawing at skies heavy with the promise of snow. The trial convened in a federal courthouse in Davenport. The Mississippi churning muddy below like the underbelly of truth exposed. I testified on the 10th. The stand a wooden pillory under fluorescent glare. Kowalski's team laid it out. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. The farm as fentanyl freeway. Exhibits flashed. My tapes. Carla's forensics. Even drone footage of midnight handoffs in the North 40. Ethan sat cuffed. Suit rumpled. That charmer's grin replaced by hollow defiance. Our eyes met once. His pleaded.
Mine, I said.
Dad and Mom occupied the gallery's front row. Dad's jaw set like flint. Mom's handkerchief a sodden flag of surrender. Ray's civil suit ran parallel. A shadow play for the farm soul. The prosecution painted Ethan as mastermind, but cross-exam cracked it open. Defense attorney, a silver-tongued shark from Chicago, probed my motives. So, Harlan, this cooperation, it coincides neatly with your lawsuit to seize family assets. Revenge. Perhaps? For being passed over. Objection overruled. The jury shifted. Eyes on me, farm girl turned informant. The betrayer betrayed. It was justice, I stated, voice steady. For the farm. For the people he hurt. But your family, the attorney pressed. You destroy them for equity. The word hung, controversial as a lit match in dry chaff. Equity, feminist buzzword or greedy grab. Pundits on local AM radio debated it. Callers splitting. Girl's a hero. Exposing the rot versus snitch in the henhouse. Blood don't lie. Dad's testimony gutted me worse. Called as character witness. He equivocated. Ethan made mistakes. But Natalie's actions tore the heart out. No denial of complicity. Just deflection. The leases exploratory. The loan, a miscommunication. Mom corroborated. Voice quavering. We just wanted stability. Stability. Code for sacrificing the daughter who wouldn't bend. The twist from Ethan's letter festered. I'd found the safe docs, prelim memos with Dad's initials, outlining the arrangement. But confronting him post-testimony, in the courthouse hall, yielded only silence. Why? I demanded, cornering him by the vending machines. You knew the risks, the migrants, the drugs. For him, Dad's eyes, once commanding, now weary. You were always the strong one.
Net så vitenskapelig. Ethan.
He's fragile. Needed the win. And after your mother's scare, the bills, we couldn't lose it all. Lose it all. But they had me. Years ago, when I'd shouldered the blame for his frailties. You used me as the firewall, I whispered. Every time. He looked away. The river's roar mocking through the window. Forgive me. No absolution came. The jury deliberated 3 days. The wait a slow bleed. I holed up in a motel. Ray pacing with bourbon-fueled pep talks. Carla texting updates from the shadows. Protests brewed outside. Migrant advocates chanting for justice. AG lobbyists decrying overreach. My story leaked. Twisted into clickbait. Sisters sting. Hero or homewrecker? Verdict dropped on the solstice eve. Guilty on all counts. 20 years. Minimum. Ethan crumpled. Led away without a glance. The gallery erupted, Mom fainting into Dad's arms. Sobs echoing off marble. But the real climax unfolded in probate court. Days later. Ray's filings, bolstered by the conviction, invoked the clause, Ethan's turpitude, voided the transfer. The judge, a stern widow from Dubuque, ruled for me. Farm reverted. Liens cleared via asset forfeiture from Ethan's accounts. I drove home through flurries, the Harlan sign creaking in welcome. Dad and Mom waited on the porch, bundled like refugees. "It's done," I said, keys jingling. "Yours to stay, if you want. But under my terms, clean books, fair labor. No more shortcuts." Dad nodded. "Broken."
Oui.
"We failed you." Mom reached.
Tentative.
"Can we start over?" "Start over." The words dangled. A lifeline or lure. I could rebuild sustainable crops, co-op shares, maybe that teaching side gig at the community college. Or walk, sell it all, vanish to the coasts with a clean slate. The twist hit by a certified mail. A week into the new year, Ethan's appeal brief.
Procès.
Buried in legalese. A bombshell, DNA results. Procured pre-trial. Paternity query, it read. Dad wasn't his father. Mom's affair. A 90s indiscretion with a traveling salesman. The seed of the golden boy. Ethan's fragility. A lifetime of covering that secret. Dad's indulgence, a guilt-fueled blind spot. I confronted Mom alone. In the kitchen where she'd baked my birthday pies. Why hide it? All these years. Tears carved channels. To keep the family. Your father. He forgave. But Ethan was his light. I couldn't shatter that. Shatter. The word ricocheted. The secrets we'd all buried. The crimes born in silence. Ethan's schemes? A son's desperate bid for belonging. Twisted by rejection's shadow. My revenge? A daughter's reclamation. Laced with the same bloodlust.
Now.
As snow dusts the fields. The farm hums under my hand. Crew paid fair. Soil tested clean. Dad helps sporadically. Mom bakes again. Tentative peace. But at night, doubts whisper, did I prove my worth? Or just trade one betrayal for another? Readers, you'd argue it over beers, heroic reckoning or vengeful overkill. Happy ending? With the prodigal returned as steward? Or tragedy? The family fractured beyond mending? I choose the fields. They don't lie. Don't flip. Plant the seed. Reap the truth. And in the heartland's unyielding rhythm, that's proof enough.